Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm delighted to be able to review a book which I've seen before on many occasions, and the new edition is now out. It's called McGREGOR on Damages. It's now edited by James Edelman. It comes to us from Sweeton, Maxwell and Thomson Reuters. It's part of the Common Law Library series, and the book is now in its 20th edition. I'm going to mention a few things in a minute about the book and obviously about McGregor himself. But let me tell you the title that Elizabeth and I have chosen for our book review. We call it the Canonical Authority on Damages, now in a new 20th edition. Elizabeth was the lead writer in the book for the review, and we had a long chat about it because damages is such an important area, because it's what the client wants. Now, the Common Law Library as a whole is a really first-class series of publications. This is where the law is to be found. And I do feel that to many people, they don't know much about the Common Law Library. These books are expensive. They are normally available in reference libraries, but they are where the law is. It's where the law is contained, and I think that's very important to bear in mind, because the reviews that we produce are done with one aim in mind. It's to educate people so they know what's available. That is the judges, they should all know anyway, I hope, the practitioners, the academics, and of course students and people who are unrepresented, of which there are many, many thousands today who don't have legal representation and need to know some very basic things sometimes. This is where the law is on damages. Let's have a look at the book. Nice green front there. Now, the book runs to quite a substantial number of pages, 1,970 odd in total. The index at the back is done on the legal taxonomy structure, which is by paragraph numbering set out by Sweeton Maxwell. There's the index there. It actually doesn't say that it's by paragraph numbering. It normally does, but it doesn't on this occasion. But however, that's the way it is. Now, right at the back, page 1900, which is right at the back, you've got the paragraph number. You can see some paragraph numbering there, and you've got the footnoting, very substantial amount of footnoting. Now, if we go to the front of the book, this is the basic front page, McGregor on Damages, 20th edition, and you can see the other titles in the Common Law series, the Common Law Library series. Now you can see the people who've been involved in this book, and you've got an edition, a list of the basic details about the book, and you've also got the list from the first book. The first edition was by John D. Main in 1856, and then it sort of ran all the way through until Harvey McGregor took it over in 1961. And I'll mention Harvey in a minute. Now what we've got at the moment is a dedication, which I will just show you. That's, I think, important. Then there's a foreword. Now the foreword is very useful because the foreword is written by Lord Hoffman, who will be known to many people, and I'm going to come back to him in a minute. Do read Lord Hoffman's foreword, because he talks about Harvey McGregor, and many people won't really know who Harvey McGregor was, but this is, I found this very moving, because actually it explains who he was and his particularly interesting approach to the way in which he looked at this subject matter and his life generally. Then there's a preface, because sadly Harvey died on the 27th of June 2015, and of course things have moved on since that time, and the preface has now been written by the new editor, well, in fact the editor. Let me just give you his correct information, because he's James Edelman, a Justice of the High Court of Australia. So he's a Mr. Justice Edelman. Now you've then got, but he's an Australian. That doesn't mean in any other way other than a very high amount of respect for his abilities. There's the table of cases, very substantial of course in damages. And then you've got the table of statutes, again very important, and you do have, in addition to that, some statutory instruments, not very many, but some. Then we get into we've also got the CPR, and the old rules as they were of the Supreme Court. Then we get into the basic structure of the book, and you can see what we've got. We've got the chapter, then there's a short index which says what's in the chapter, then you've got the paragraph numbering which corresponds to what's in the index, and then at the bottom you have footnotes, and there are footnotes all the way through. You can see basically that's the very, very important detail referring to any particular cases or referencing, and that's the book itself. As I said, runs to a very substantial number of pages, the final page being about 1,980 odd, so it's just under the 2,000, and like all of these books in the Common Law Library series, it's a heavy book in all senses of the word. Now, McGregor is known to me, and I think to many students and practitioners of my generation, for damages, and obviously I didn't know very much about Harvey himself apart from his name until I read actually his obituary, and I suspect quite a lot of people may well have been in the same position. But do read Lord Hoffman's comments at the beginning, because I do think this is effectively, in part, this book is a tribute to the work that Harvey McGregor put in for such a long period of time, and became effectively the authority on damages. Damages being a very important area, again, for students and for people like myself in practice, where we obviously use a number of different methods of trying to work out the level and the quantum of damages and how the damage system works. But this book actually is the definitive title. Now, what do we therefore say about the book? Well, Elizabeth, as I've indicated, was the lead writer on this particular review, and we came together, we had a long discussion about this, and this is what we've come up with together. There are more than a few legal texts out there with lengthy publishing pedigrees, some dating back to the 19th century, yet forever current thanks to regular updating over the decades. We're very grateful, of course, for this particular book. Few, though, are as venerable as this particular one. Yes, it's McGREGOR on Damages, and it's a classic work in this area of law because it continues to maintain its authority and clout in the new edition from Sweet and Maxwell, Thomson, Reuters, Common Law Library. And in the words of Lord Hoffman, who writes the touching candour in the foreword from Brick Court Chambers, it remains the canonical authority on the subject. A formidable and eminently readable work it is, which now numbers almost 2,000 pages, and it traces its lineage back to 1856 under the authorship of one John D. Main, who co-authored all but two of the next 7 editions with Lumley Smith. And by 1946, as Lenny Hoffman recalls, at least one reviewer remarked that at any rate in living memory, Main had the reputation of being a horrible book. Now, I have to just say that we've, as students many years ago now, there were a number of books around that were horrible books, but we had to do them because there was nothing else available. And what I like about what we've got today is it's no longer a horrible book, it's a very good book. Presumably, of course, things, as Elizabeth and I say, must have improved a bit under the authors who followed. All the more so from 1961 onwards, when Harvey McGregor, who became a silk in 1980, was the book's sole author and continued as such until the 19th edition in 2014, which sadly preceded his death a year later in 2015. It was he whose first love was the law, of course, and he was elected Warden of New College, Oxford. Many, of course, will remember him, whose scholarship and verve elevated the book's reputation, as he proudly remained its sole author, not editor, over the next 8 editions. Now, says Hoffman, the book passes into the hands not of the team, but of a single editor, chosen by Harvey himself. Well, please just remember there's a bit of help going on here, but the fact is you've got a single person who is the focal point. And that makes quite a difference, because some of the contents of some of the books in the Common Law Library series, that the individual chapters are written by specialists in a particular area. Now, the thing about damages is that you've really, I think, got to have one person. I'm sure Harvey saw that. You've got to have one person who is the person who's going to explain the subject. And that's exactly why the decision has been made to continue. And of course, the said new editor is James Edelman, who's a Justice of the High Court in Australia, who, assisted by 2 expert contributors, presides over the updating of the volume. And in the preface he mentions Harvey's wish that his life's work would remain as a single person's work rather than becoming the product of a team. And as I've indicated, that's probably going to be the case with this particular area. I can't see necessarily the same approach being adopted in contract, in tort, or in agency, or in some of the other areas, for a lot of other reasons, but I can see that for damages. So for him and for me, says Edelman, coherence in the law is a paramount value, one of the core principles that I aim to maintain, and I think he's very much succeeded in what he's doing, and good luck to him for the future. And referring to Harvey's greatest academic legacy, Edelman pays tribute to the book's coherence, its astonishingly comprehensive coverage, and its incisive commentary. And that's, of course, the legacy which we've got and which will continue. And in the final word, Edelman apologises, oddly enough, for the books not having been written in gender-neutral language, although all revisions and rewritten parts have been. Well, we're in that era at the moment, and rightly too, I suppose. But you know, we do understand the general statements that are being made. Quote, the style of centuries past will be reduced or removed in future editions, he adds, as the book is modernised and rationalised further. Now, I understand that, but don't go too far. We've already got a lot of this happening. Now, for crying out loud, guys, is all one can say to that, of course, in some respects, but spare us yet another dose of the pernicious political correctness, because you can only go so far. And we've, I think, reached the edge of it personally. We just want to read about the law and use this brilliant book as a defensive weapon in the event of being or getting sued. And that, of course, is the basis of it. So, according to Hoffman, McGregor certainly weaponised his book, you might say, as he lay ill in hospital in Edinburgh following a stroke. He placed the book on the table next to his bed so that the medical staff can see I know all about suing for negligence. Oh, well, that's the way it is. Let me conclude by saying this. Suffice to say, this book makes for compelling and even compulsory reading for many a practitioner, and, for that matter, any lay reader, that's unrepresented parties, with a need-to-know mission to understand in some detail the intricacies of damages defined initially in the book's introduction, quote, as an award in money for a civil wrong. That's effectively it, but remember the historic background of damage is very much the cornerstone of the post-Norman Conquest common law development. Now also, as you would expect, the book, being bang up to date, contains a wealth of references for further research, and again I think that's very helpful, depending on what purpose you want it for. For my purposes as a practitioner, I only need a relatively small idea of concepts of damages, although it does help sometimes in the way I might address perhaps a court. But I'm very grateful to all the people who are now involved in this book, and I'd like obviously to thank, he's no longer with us of course, but people who are no longer here, absent friends. I'd like to thank Harvey McGregor for everything that he's done, because he has made the law so much easier, and that horrible book isn't horrible anymore. Now, the date of the publication is cited at 2018, and I'm reviewing this in the summer. Let's just have a last look. There's the book again, green cover, spine. Let's open it up in the middle. I don't know where I'm going to come. Positive covenants, sale of land, then lease of land. Here we go. You can see the structure. A lot of work. There's the index there. You've got the paragraph numbering and a huge amount of footnoting. An awful lot of work for one man to do, but he did it. And it does continue to have a tremendous amount of content to it. You can see it's a very substantial work. And I will go back to the beginning, because the beginning is actually the foreword from Hoffman. And do read it, because I found it very touching. and he does refer to resemblances to a Mr. Toad, but I think you should read the foreword rather than me saying anything about it. With that, thank you Harvey, thank you Lenny, and thank you to everybody at the Common Law Library for this important book. It makes our lives so much easier. Very grateful to all of you. Thank you. Goodbye.